This story deals with domestic violence. Day 18. Echo. Benjamin stepped into the pub, trying to scrape some of the muck from his boots in the doorway. However, the line of footprints to the bar that he could just make out in the gloom suggested there was little point. He took off his hat and naively looked for somewhere to hang his coat as his eyes adjusted. There were several empty tables, one occupied by a hunched figure in the corner. He chose to sit at the bar, within the reach of a couple of candles illuminating the landlord. The stool shifted on its loose fixings as he sat on it, Benjamin's shock as it wobbled but a satisfied smirk on the barman's lips. "Might I have a beer, my good man?" asked Benjamin, hearing his own accent more distinctly than ever. Without replying, the landlord reached under the bar for a pint glass. He set the cloudy ale in front of Benjamin, who decided to wait for it to settle, in case there was anything untoward hiding under the white foam. "You lost, sir?" The landlord was looking Benjamin up and down, and apparently already knew the answer. "I don't suppose you know a Tobias Crick, do you?" inquired Benjamin. The barman's face softened. "Toby? Right, I do. He's in most nights. He ain't in trouble, is he?" Benjamin was surprisingly touched by the man's concern. "I certainly hope not. He and I are brothers, you see." "Ha! Don't be trying to make a fool of me. You two brothers? The only time Toby's been anywhere near a coat and hat as fine as those was when he was hauled up to the Crown Court." "I understand it may be hard to believe, but yes, we are kin." "You're what?" "Brothers." "Yeah, you said that." The landlord looked him up and down anew. "Now you mention it, there is something. What is it, eyes? Hair? You aren't twins, that's for sure." No, he's my older brother." "And he's my younger brother," came a shout from the doorway. There stood Tobias, in frayed brown woolen trousers that didn't match the jacket, pale flecks of drying mud and clay up to his knees. An equally brown cigarette was poking out of his unshaven face, topped off with a jaunty peak cap, perhaps once black or dark green, but now brown. "And he only bloody made it." He clomped across the uneven floor and slapped Benjamin so hard on the shoulder he almost went face first into his untouched pint. "I'll have the same, Tom. It looks like we're celebrating." "Right you are," said Tom the landlord, fishing out another dirty glass. "I was starting to think he was pulling me leg. The lord of the manor come down to have a laugh at the little folk." The figure in the corner coughed, then wheezed. "No, not a lord," said Tobias. "Almost as rich as one, though, eh, Ben?" He slapped Benjamin again and laughed as he relit his cigarette. "We haven't seen each other for some time, it's true. When I wrote to you, for help, I wasn't sure you'd even come." "How are you—" The landlord vacillated a pointed finger between the two men, trying to find the words. "I mean, how is it that you— and you—" Tobias put him out of his misery. "How did Benjamin here come to be dressed in such finery while I'm in here every night covered in shit?" "Well," stammered Tom, the landlord, "I wouldn't—" Benjamin blushed and looked away, his eyes meeting those of the stranger in the corner. There was a rush of sound and air through his whole head, and he stood up abruptly, knocking his pint all over his brother. "Jesus, man!" Tobias blurted out. "What's the matter with you?" I... Benjamin was dumbstruck, and Tobias and Tom looked in the direction of the little man in the corner, fast asleep, his pipe seconds from falling out of his mouth. "What, old Mr. Goldman? He didn't give you a fright, did he?" The landlord chuckled. "He is like a piece of furniture, so I suppose you didn't notice him before." Except Benjamin hadn't seen old Mr. Goldman. He had seen his father. Their father. "You're as white as a sheet," said Tobias. "Well, not my sheets. Have a drink, man, it'll settle you." He pushed his own glass into Benjamin's shaking hands. I've never been one not to share, Tom, see? Ever since we were boys. I've never asked before, Benjamin, but I've got myself into a little bit of hot water. Borrowed some money from, well, not the sort of people you should borrow money from. Benjamin sighed. He was almost relieved that his suspicions had been right. It certainly could have been worse. He took a sip of the beer, which sure enough did make him feel better. Tobias took the silence as a challenge. I never complained when Father's will was read. Benjamin snorted into the beer. Tobias. All right, Tobias headed him off. I might have contested it. A little. But the sum was more than a little. And it was my birthright. He wasn't wrong, and Benjamin had struggled with the facts since the will reading. Father had made his fortune making sewing machines, but not until much later in life. For years, mother, father, and 2 boys had lived in penury as the man's obsession consumed him, convinced he knew how to make something faster and more accurate. Tobias, being strong-minded and older, had run away at 14, the day after their mother had died. He blamed their father for keeping them in the freezing cold, forcing mother to work for a pittance and driving her to an early grave. A year later, father cracked it, and suddenly, he and, as he saw it, his only son, landed in the lap of luxury. But despite sending Benjamin to the finest schools, dressing him handsomely, providing staff to cook and clean, father only had him on whom to mete out his misery. He would beat Benjamin terribly, tears rolling down his own face, and when Benjamin was older, resorted to belittling and undermining him at every opportunity. Father clearly felt guilty for mother's death and driving Tobias away, so why didn't he beat himself, Benjamin used to wonder. But young Ben was the one that was punished, even though he had lost his mother and brother on the same day. That was why, when father had made Benjamin his sole heir, he felt he had earned it. How much is it? Asked Benjamin. Tobias straightened up on his stool. Well, I wouldn't expect the whole amount. How much? 20 guineas? Tom the barkeep let out a low whistle. Benjamin looked over at the sleeping man in the corner. As he stared, he felt his skin was cold, his heart was beating slowly. The sense of dread and fear that had overcome him seemed foreign to him now, had happened to someone else. He looked into Tobias's expectant face and thought how dim he looked, how insignificant. He pulled out his pocketbook. I'm going to give you 100, he said, as he scribbled out a cheque. He turned to the frozen Tobias to check he understood. Guineas. He ripped out the cheque and in one smooth movement slammed it down on the bar. And I never want to see you again. He tipped his hat to Tom the landlord and, without a second look, strode out into the night.